So fitness and selection permitting, Jimmy Anderson will end his illustrious international career after the first Test match at Lord's this summer. Now, this was a story that has accelerated very quickly since it was broken by Ali Martin in The Guardian last evening, and it's amounted to this announcement from Jimmy that Lord's will be his last Test match. Two former England captains alongside me. This story has accelerated remarkably quickly. Has any of it surprised you?
Not especially. The Ashes are 2 winters away. There's absolutely no chance of a 43-year-old opening the bowling for England in the Ashes. And I know that Brendan McCullum and Ben Stokes have always talked about living for the moment, living for now, but they also talk about planning for the future and having half an eye on the future. And everything we've heard coming out of the England camp at the start of the year has been about pace, strike rates, cutting edge in preparation for the Ashes, and all the young bowlers that England have contracted have been of that type. So it's not that much of a surprise, but I'm very glad that he's going to get that test at Lord's to just round off what has been a quite magnificent career and unquestionably one of England's greatest ever performers.
Will the numbers ever be beaten? It is absolutely remarkable that he can play 2 decades of international sport as a bowler.
Yeah, not in Test match cricket, not the way the game is going, the direction it's going, not by a seamer, definitely not. I mean, you shouldn't say never, but he's so far ahead of the rest as far as seamers go. And it's, it started at Lord's 21 years ago, it's going to end at Lord's. There won't be a dry eye in the house. He is by far England's greatest ever bowler. The work he's put in behind the scenes, the fitness, the skill, the coming back from injury. Captains like me asking him to come back at 6 o'clock with a new ball and go again, or the next day when the body's a bit stiff and sore and go again. Phenomenal cricketer. And I'm pleased, fitness and selection permitted, I'm pleased he's going to get that week at Lord's. He deserves it.
Some will say, though, all right, the decision has been made and they're going to move on from Jimmy Anderson. Why should he be afforded one last game at Lord's? All right, your time's done. We're going in a different direction. We should move on. You can't all have the send-off like Stuart Broad got at the Oval last summer.
No, and in a way he's not, because of the way this story has accelerated. But I'm not particularly a big one for sentiment in terms of selection. But if you said right now, looking at what we've seen over the last 2 years, if you look at his record over the last 2 years, his average and strike rate is pretty much where it's been throughout his career. And if you looked at, although the numbers weren't great in India, just in terms of the performance, it would be hard to argue that he's still not amongst the best swing and seam bowlers that England have. So I think it's perfectly fair to argue that he deserves his place right now. If you were picking a side today, I know the Test match is not until after the World T20 in June, but if you're picking a side today, you could make the argument that Jimmy Anderson deserves to be in the side. And then, given his career, the 20 years of magnificent performances that we've seen, I think it's perfectly reasonable that, fitness permitting, that he gets that Test match at Lord's, and hopefully he can get the kind of send-off. I mean, it will be impossible to top what his mate Stuart Broad did at the Oval by beating Australia, hitting his last ball for 60. He ain't going to do that, I don't think.
He could take
get a wicket with his last
10
ball.
for at Lord's and go past Warney.
Yeah, that would be something remarkable. Of course he should play at Lord's. He's Jimmy Anderson. Just because he had an average Ashes, that's 1 year or 1 summer. Anyone watched the 20 summers before that with the Duke's ball? Ath mentioned about McCullum's philosophy of live today as if it's your last day, but plan for the future. And that's what they've done here. Living as if your last day, so you select your best side for that particular game. And you cannot tell me, watching Jimmy Anderson over the last 20 years, 15 years, 10 years, 5 years, that he's not in England's best side with the Duke's ball. But they do have to plan for the future. I think Atherton, I don't know whose quote it was, Australia is no place for old men, but he will be 43. He will be 42 this summer, so they have to look to the future. But he deserves to be at Lord's. He'd still be in with the Duke's ball in hand, he'd still be in my 11.